doing life together, prayer evening on a Friday every couple of weeks, or whenever you can get together. You know, you all know the saying, we are creatures of habit. And I'd love to speak to you a little bit now about establishing winning habits. In the first section, I told you a little bit about P Company, 7 events, 3 days, and the reward for passing P Company is that you get to jump out of an aeroplane. Now, not much of a reward, I hear some of you say. But before you can jump out of an aeroplane with the British Army, you have to go through a lot of training. All the British Army parachute training is done at RAF Bryce Norton in Oxfordshire. And when you get to RAF Bryce Norton, it's the parachute training school is in a huge hangar. But when I say huge, I mean it's absolutely humongous. This thing is so big, there's a fuselage of a Hercules C-130 aircraft in the one corner. And it looks positively small in there. And in this fuselage, you practice the first of 3 phases of a parachute jump. The 3 phases are exit the aircraft, then you have your in-flight phase, and then your landing phase. So this fuselage has a door on either side. You get in on the one side, and then you jump out the other. So you just practice your exit drills over and over and over again. Then in a different part of the hangar, you have harnesses suspended from the roof via cables, parachute harnesses. So you strap yourself into this harness, they remove the ladder, and then you hang free. And this is where you practice all your in-flight drills. And then you have a different part of the hangar again with huge matted areas and some other equipment where you do all your landing drills. At first you just learn to roll. Then you learn to jump off a little 1-foot step and you roll upon impact. Then you do it with a ramp so that you do it with momentum. And you do this over and over in all the different directions that you could possibly land. So it's every direction of the compass pretty much. Forward, sideways, backwards, diagonally backwards. Because in a military parachute is not as agile as a free fall parachute. So you don't have that much control. You land in the direction the wind takes you. Now you go through all of these phases of training and you do them over and over and over again, and then you're back in the fuselage, and then you're back again in the harnesses, and then you're back on the mats, and then you're back. And by the time you've done them several hundreds of times, and you're sick and tired and frankly a bit bored with it all, you do them another 100 times. And then on my 3rd jump, I learned why. As we approached the doorway, the guy behind me accidentally nudged me in the back. He just bumped into me. And I lost my footing, my balance. So I hit the doorway with my shoulder. And at that point, I had to correct myself before I could exit. But in the moment of correction, I missed my slot. Because with British paratroopers, we jump out of the side of the planes. The Americans jump out the back. But when you jump out of the side, you jump out of both sides. Left, right, port, starboard, port, starboard. I was on the starboard side. Missed my opportunity because I was delayed getting out. So that meant that the port guy and I went out more or less at the same time. And then the backdraft of the aircraft also threw us together. So once my chute opened and I'd gone through my exit drills and I look up and I'm starting to go through my in-flight drills, the first thing is you assess the airspace around you. And I realized this guy's way too close. So I call out the command that we were taught in those hangars. I call out to him, steer away, steer away. But to be fair to me, he was simply too close. And as I said, those things don't steer very well anyway. And there's nothing he could do. So he came through 2 of my rigging lines. Now we're entangled. Now, when you carry your parachute on your back, all your kit has to go elsewhere, your military kit. That goes in a container which is strapped to the inside of your left leg. That container is attached to a 15-foot rope which is tied around your waist. Now the normal drill is, once you have assessed that the airspace around you is clear, you release the container, which then drops and dangles 15 feet below you. Because if you try and land with that thing can weigh 40, 45 pounds, still strapped to your leg, can you see what that could do to your leg? So you drop it and it hangs below you. You'll often see a little black dot below paratroopers on photographs, or if you see them on television with all the jumps they do with a Remembrance Day and so on, that little blob below their feet. That's all your kit. I'm looking up and this guy is up right above me. We're entangled. We can't disengage. And I'm thinking, if he releases that container now, that's going to hurt. So I call up to him, hey, buddy, hang on. We'll make a plan. Just hang in there. Now, what we didn't realize at the time was, because our parachutes are so close together, my parachute is open slightly below his. And it's taking up all the airspace. This is our third jump. We're greenhorns at this. Because it's taking up the airspace, there's an air vacuum being created between our parachutes. So the next moment, his parachute collapsed. Came tumbling down. I tell you, he missed me by inches. Came tumbling past, and he was screaming like a stuck pig. And I said to him, hey, hang on. My parachute can carry both our weights. Calm down. But because he was below me, somehow the next moment his parachute reinflated. But my parachute is now above his. As his parachute reinflated, he's below me. It's now safe for him, so he releases his containers. So both of us, or at least our containers, are released. But without realizing it, I'm in trouble. Because if his parachute now takes up all the airspace, creating a vacuum between his and mine, and my chute collapses, and this happens 30 to 50 feet above the ground, I'm going to tumble, and there's not going to be enough time for my parachute to reinflate. That means I'm going to come down hard. But fortunately, in the British Army, we jump at 900 feet. Now, if you think about it, there are some guys who can hit a golf ball 900 feet. That's not very far at all. Other nations jump at 1,500 feet. We had American, French, and German special forces jump with us, but they didn't do the 2-week training that we did. I have photographs of a Yank being loaded up in the back of a field ambulance. Got it wrong. They're not used to jumping at 900 feet. But on that day, it worked to my advantage, because we were you're only in the air for 30 seconds or so, which is a good thing if someone's shooting at you, by the way. You're only in there for about 30 seconds or so. So before my parachute could collapse, bam, we hit the ground and the jump was over. Now, guys, it wasn't really until I saw the expression of my jumps instructor. Your jumps instructor is on the ground and he watches the whole thing out of the plane. As my jumps instructor came running along and I saw the panic in his face, the look of terror, that's when I realized we had just dodged a bullet. Because this thing could have gone very wrong. As the guy nudged me in the back at the top of the plane, I could have hit the doorway, and you have a static line which is attached to a cable on the inside of the plane which rips out your parachute from your pack. And you hand the line to the door master as you leave. If that line got wrapped around my arm or my head, I could have snapped my arm like a twig. Exiting the aircraft could have got me into a lot of trouble if I did it incorrectly. But I didn't. I exited in good shape. Why? Because all those drills that we did in that fuselage in the hangar, hundreds and hundreds of times over, they just kicked in. I didn't have to think about it. Hit the doorway, I automatically corrected myself and went through my drills and exited in a good shape. When we were entangled, we could have made bad decisions, this other jumper and I. But we didn't. Remained calm. Because those drills that we did over and over again in those harnesses in the hangar kicked in. Trying to land with another man's parachute open, right? Those things are huge. I couldn't see the ground very well. You've got to judge the speed at which you are approaching the ground to judge your jump. It was an awkward landing, but I executed a good landing. Why? Because all those drills kicked in. I honestly, look, I'm grateful to the grace of God. But I honestly believe that the reason I am able to tell you this story here today is because on that day, those drills saved my life. Some time ago, a friend told me about an office party that he attended, and it was around about Christmas time, and he and a female colleague were having a conversation that were going the wrong way. But then his drills kicked in. In those 10 seconds, his drills kicked in. Because he'd memorized some verses from the book of Proverbs. And these verses were about a man who runs after another woman, and it says that this man is like a deer caught in a noose. And any moment now, an arrow could pierce his liver. It will cost him his life. And he walked away from that conversation. Him, his wife, his children, that lady, everyone saved from a world of heartache and pain. His drills kicked in. Drills, and from time to time, these drills have helped me. Be driving along and someone cuts me up at a roundabout or pushes in the motorway, and I feel that road rage thing welling up inside of me. And if I'm lucky, some of my drills will kick in because I've memorized some verses. It is to a man's glory to overlook an offense. It's good to avoid a conflict. It's to his honor to do so. Every fool is quick to quarrel. And if I remember that at the moment, then that often helps me walk away from that situation. Drills are just a series of exercises or actions that we perform that forms a routine. In the army, we would do our drills over and over again, live fire drills, so that we could do them when bullets were whizzing around our heads. Playing rugby, we would do our drills over and over again in the week. So on a Saturday, when we are tired and fatigued and under pressure, we could do them automatically. That's what drills are. And then when it comes to life drills, Paul says to his young apprentice, Timothy, don't forget about your faith drills. He says, train yourself to be godly. This doesn't just come, guys. We have to train ourselves to be godly. So spending time with one another like this, going to a prayer meeting on a Friday night, possibly saying a prayer in the morning, reading something, going to church, spending time with other men, all of these drills over and over again. A wise man once wrote of the humble ant, he said, the ant has no master, yet all day long it works away, storing up provisions during the good times for when the tough times come. During the summer for when the winter comes. And that's what we do when we establish these winning habits, when we do all these drills. Because when the tough times come, when the challenges come, when we have that 10 seconds to make a decision, when we're wound up in a car, when we're wound up at home with our wives and our kids, those drills can kick in. It is Aristotle who said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is not an act, it is a habit, establishing winning habits. But the reality is that in the arena, we will sometimes be disappointed. And how do we handle hard times and disappointment? As Rob said, I come from South Africa. I was born and bred there, and rugby is in my blood. I think I was about 12 years old before I realized that a ball could be round. I thought they were all oval-shaped. I don't talk rugby that much anymore. It's really difficult. We were good at rugby once when we didn't really live in fear of the Japanese or the Italians. These days, the boys are struggling a little bit. I try and disguise my accent. Someone asks me, I say I'm Austrian. Then they don't talk about rugby. I'll be back. Yeah. But it's been my privilege to have played with some pretty good rugby players. As Rob said, half a dozen or so of the best that South Africa have ever produced. Played with British Lions in Wales. But let me tell you, one of the best rugby players I ever shared a pitch with was a guy by the name of Farnes Lombard. Farnes was a winger. Gosh, this boy was quick. But he had good feet. He could change direction on a dime. He had good hands, strong under the high ball and good in defense. If you were beaten in defense and you look back and Farnes was the last man you knew he'd make his tackle. But what made him truly exceptional back in 1992, he was huge. Back then, the wingers were a little bit smaller. I don't know if you remember Campese from Australia and the Underwood brothers and Ian Evans from Wales. And we had Chester Williams, small, nippy guys. And Farnes had all of these attributes, but he was also big. This is 3 years before Jonah Loma burst onto the scene and changed the face of rugby forever. In my day, a backline player was a little bit. I was an open side flanker. They were afraid of you. Now you have to look up at these boys. They're huge. Farnes was big. He'd already been playing for the Blue Bull side. A professional rugby league side from Australia were trying to get him down there. He had the world at his feet, Springbok written all over his name. And then one evening in a training session, he very badly dislocated a left knee. And a well-meaning bystander came along, tried to relocate the knee, but in doing so, damaged some of the blood vessels and the nerves that run into the lower leg. Now, guys, I can remember visiting my friend in hospital. And as I stood by his bedside, I looked down, his leg heavily bandaged, and I couldn't stop myself. Tears were just running down my cheeks. And he looked up and he said, "Hey, mate, don't worry. I'll still be a Springbok one day." 2 days later, the doctors amputated his leg just below the knee. At his first Paralympic Games, Vanus Lombard won 3 gold medals for South Africa. He set 3 new world records. He competed in several Paralympics, winning a total of 6 gold, 2 bronze, 1 silver. One of his world records still stands this day. It's nearly 19 years later. And the last time I saw Vanus, he was stood on top of an open-top bus, going through the streets of Johannesburg, the Olympic team on a little victory tour, showing off their latest medals, and thousands of people lining the streets. This was just after the Athens Olympics. Thousands of people cheering, and Vanus stood at the top of this bus and he was waving his latest haul of medals at the people. But he looked unsteady as he stood on the bus, and at first I thought I was making a mistake. I was watching on telly, so I looked a little bit closer, and then I thought, nah, this can't be. I got up from the settee, I went right up to the television. Could it be? Is what I'm seeing really what I'm seeing? Vanus was unsteady on that bus because in his one hand he was waving his medals, and in his other hand, his leg. Triumph and disaster, 1 yard apart. Guys, I love sport. In sport, it's easy to measure the difference between gold and silver. You measure it in seconds, sometimes in a little bit of a distance, sometimes fractions of seconds. In team sports, you measure it in points on a board. Sometimes it's in distance, like golf. If you drive a ball 300-400 yards or have to tap in a 1-inch putt, both count as a stroke. Fame, fortune, reputations, all won and lost on a stroke, on an inch. You can measure the difference between winning and losing, gold and silver in sport. But in life, it's not always that easy. Sometimes in life, we can be close to a dream, a goal, a breakthrough in our lives, but we don't know because we give up. Disaster and triumph, a yard apart. Sometimes in our personal lives, we might feel like we're a rubbish student or not good at our work. Someone else has all the talents. We might feel like a rubbish dad if you're fortunate enough to be a dad. A rubbish husband. Sometimes we could even feel like rubbish followers of Jesus. But disaster and triumph are a yard apart. Keep on keeping on. A few years ago, I met an incredible man at a conference that probably taught me more about attitude than any other in the world. Do you know it's Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps of the Second World War? And you read his story, it's incredible what he went through. He lost his wife, he lost his family, he lost his business, his home, he lost loved ones, all in those concentration camps. But somehow he managed to get through the camps, but not only get through the camps, he helped others do so as well, countless. Dedicated the rest of his life to helping survivors somehow find a new normal in life. And then when they asked him, "Sir, how did you do that? Not only get through this, but encourage others to get through it." And he wrote this: "Sometimes we are not in control of a situation. Someone else is. They could take away your health. They could take away your liberty. They could take away your loved ones. They could take away your very life." But then he said this: "The last human freedom that no one can take away is your freedom to choose your response in any given situation, to choose your attitude." Now, the guy that has taught me more about attitude than anyone else in this world, I met at a conference in Durban some years ago now, and it was a weekend conference. We got together on the Friday night. It was a welcome meal, and afterwards I sat outside. I was already living in the UK, been here for a few years, and so I was just sitting down, chatting to some local people. Lovely to speak the language again. And in the semi-darkness, out steps a man, and in a Canadian voice, he says, "Can I join you? Well, I jump up and I say, sure, of course, and I hold out the hand in a friendly greeting. But the moment I do that, I realize I've just made a dreadful mistake. Because the guy in front of me has no arms. And I freeze. He looks up at me and he says, are you serious? What do you do now? Guys, it feels like forever. I'm thinking, do I pull my hand back? Do I say sorry? Do I say, can I get you a drink? I don't know. What am I going to do? So I'm frozen there to the spot. But what he does next is he blows me away. He kicks off his shoe. He doesn't wear any socks. He kicks off his shoe and he lifts his foot. And somehow he wraps his toe around his big toe around my thumb. I'm standing there shaking this guy's foot. Do you know what he says to me? Hey, not many people do that. Can I sit with you? So we sit on this picnic table and he tells me a little bit about his story. His name is Alvin Law and he's a thalidomide baby. Thalidomide was a morning sickness pill that pregnant mums had taken in the 60s that caused awful birth defects all over the world. It was a huge outcry over this stuff. Alvin was a thalidomide baby. He was born without arms. He learned to his whole life he had to go through without arms. And then the next day on stage, he told us about the time when in high school he went to his music teacher and he said, Miss, can I join the band? Ooh, Alvin, how are you going to play an instrument? You have no arms. So he goes away and somehow welds these long rods onto a trombone. And he sits and he learns to play the trombone with his feet. Incredible. Then he plays the drums with he's actually on stage. He plays the drums with his feet. And he tells us about the time when he said to his music teacher, Miss, could you please tell me, could you teach me to play the piano? Alvin, you have no fingers, huh? Alvin Law asks us to shut our eyes. We're several hundred people in this auditorium. We sat there, eyes shut, and the next minute the most incredible piano music is just bouncing off the walls. And I open up my eyes and I see Alvin on stage playing the piano with his toes. And he's playing a song that he had written himself. He dedicated it to his old music teacher. It was called An Ode to the Old Bag in School Who Said I Couldn't Make Music. On that Friday night, as Alvin Law and I sat on a picnic bench under the African sky, he shared a little bit about his life philosophy with me. He said, Gerrit, there are many things in this world I can't do. I have no arms. But I choose not to dwell on those. Instead, I choose to focus on what I can do, even though I don't have any arms. Then he said this, every day of my life I find something to be grateful for. He called it an attitude of gratitude. Guys, life can be tough sometimes. We don't always get to choose our situations, and it doesn't always work out the way that we wish. The Bible says we plan our steps, but the Lord orders them. But in any given situation, we get to choose our response. And if we encourage you to always include the Lord in that response. Now, for the last bit of this section, Rob is going to come up and talk a little bit more about what comes through the gates, and he's going to talk about finishing the race. But guys, in the break, he said to me, Gerrit, I don't think they like me very much. So they're not laughing at my jokes. And so would you, when he comes up now, give him an absolutely huge Aberdeen welcome.
Oh, by the way, Gerrit, you left your hemorrhoid pills in the back of the car. Our time together is nearly over, but let me mention one thing that's coming through those gates, for some of us anyway. It's financial pressure. My dad was a postman. Dad didn't earn much money. But he used to take me aside once every year or so, and he would recite to me a bit from Dickens. He would say, son, annual income, 20 shillings, expenditure, 19 and sixpence, result, happiness. Annual income, 20 shillings, expenditure, 20 and sixpence, result, misery. But I was a young lawyer. People lent me money. I'd get credit cards, mortgages. I began to ignore every bit of advice my old dad ever gave me. And I remember Dan and I had not been married very long, and I can remember coming down in the early morning darkness, 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and falling into a sofa and just crying. I was in so much debt. I didn't know how to get out of it. And if you'd looked at two men, the rising young lawyer and the old postman, and asked who's in financial trouble, you'd have got it wrong. And if you're in debt or you've been in debt, you'll know it's a horrible thing. You're almost frozen like a rabbit in the headlights of a car. This financial pressure. How you almost feel stupid, guilty. How did it happen? A woman wrote to me some years ago. She said she went to an old cupboard in her home and opened it, and out tumbled hundreds of unopened letters, bills. She said to her husband, "How could you do this to me?" He said, "I honestly thought if I hid them, they might go away." If you're in that kind of situation, how do you get out of it? Well, guys, some people need more income. You won't convince me. They're just too poor. But for most of us, no matter what we earn, this is not a matter of income. My dad never did own his own home. He never did get on a holiday. He never did own a car. But my dad was content, and he was never, ever in debt. For most of us, this is a matter of expenditure. In fact, most people spend about 10% more than they get coming in. And you can prove that to yourself. You think, when we get that rise, when the rise comes through in January, we're going to be fine. And we are for a couple of months, and then we begin to spend up to it. So what do? I wrote a book called The Money Secret. If you see any of our resources, go online, and you can't afford them. Even our courses cost him £35 a pop. Drop us a line. We'll gladly send them to you free of charge. And you could get my book, The Money Secret. And in the end, at the back of that, I talk about making a simple budget. You can do it on computer, you can do it at the back of my book, there's a form there, you can make one up. You list, first of all, your income. That doesn't take most of us very long. And then your expenditure, put everything down, just everything. Food, petrol, just everything, entertainment, whatever, you put all down there. And most of us find that the figure at the bottom of expenditure is about 10% above income. So the first task is to get rid of some of that expenditure. Guys, Sky Sports is brilliant, but Sky Sports may have to go. This may have to go. That may have to go. I remember my dad said to me, "Son, what you do in that gym thing you go to?" I said, "Well, Dad, I run." He said, "Where'd you run?" I said, "Dad, I just run on a machine." Honestly, my dad wasn't being sarcastic. He didn't have a sarcastic bone in his body. He genuinely was trying to find out. He said, "Why don't you run in the street?" I said, "Well, Dad, it gets cold and put a coat on." He said, "What else do you do there?" I said, "I cycle." I could see where this is going. He said, "Where'd you cycle?" I said, "I don't cycle anywhere, Dad. It's just like a fixed bike." He said, "How much does it cost to be part of this gym thing?" I said, "Dad, it's £40 a month." For most of my time, I knew Dad. He earned £14 a week. He's a postman for 46 years. I remember when he finished, they gave him his gratuity, and he brought it home in cash. The results of 46 years, £1,300 in cash on the table. £40 a month, Dad. He said, "Are you telling me you pay almost £500 a year out of taxed income?" Because he wasn't stupid. He said, "How often do you go to this thing?" I said, Dad, when I started, I used to go about 3 or 4 times a week. Now sometimes I go once a month." He said, "Son, if I owned that gym thing, do you know what I'd do? I'd have my office with a big plate glass window overlooking the drive. And when you came in, I'd go, quick, look, here he comes. Here's the sucker who pays us almost £500 a year to walk nowhere and cycle nowhere." And it just goes. And you have... This is not rocket science, guys. Einstein said compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. If you've got a credit card and you're making the minimum payment every month and you've got other payments on the card, and you buy a shirt costing £15, do you know how long it will take you to pay that shirt off? It's just under 15 years. It won't all be paid off over 15 years. You'll have paid most of it back over 15 years. And of course, compound interest will work in your favor. At the back of my book, I give an illustration of it. If you've got a mortgage of £100,000 at 6%, hope you're not borrowing anything at 6% at the moment, but if you are, and you could afford £17 a week more, I know it's a lot, you will knock 5 years off that mortgage. If you could increase that slightly to around about £40, you'll knock 10 years off, send £22,000. The power of compound interest is incredible. But if what we do, we say, we've got all this credit card, and at first we thought we were clever. We had 0% card and move it from there and we think we're clever, but soon we're maxed out on all the cards. If you've got 5 credit cards, and you're making the minimum payment on each one of them, and you want to really get out of debt, this is what you do. A couple of steps. First of all, you cut them up. They won't explode. Keep a debit card if you want to. You actually cut them up. And then either on your computer or on a piece of paper, you draw 5 towers. The first tower is the tallest one. That's the one with the biggest rate of interest. The interest on this sucker is something like 32% or something. Something really stupid with base at around whatever it is, 1, 2. And then the next tower is a little lower. That's the next down credit card. That's 22%. And the next one a little lower. 5 towers coming down in order. And what you do is this. You make the minimum payment on every card, but you throw everything you can, everything you've saved from trimming your budget at this giant at 32%. So on that one, you make the minimum payment and everything else, and you throw it at that giant. And it might take a couple of years, but eventually that giant will fall. And then you take everything you were paying on that one and you move it down to the next one, and you throw everything at that, plus the minimum payment you were paying on that anyway. And eventually that will fall. The sense of getting out of debt and the freedom is incredible. And you know, there are incredible organizations. The problem when we go through tough times, and I've been there, is we think, I'm so stupid, nobody could ever help me. Christians Against Poverty, there are other organizations. Don't be afraid to ask for that kind of help. Financial pressure. It is one of the greatest things that destroys marriages. It's not just you. I would go all over the world to say, whatever you're going through, it's not just you. Whatever comes through the gate, we have to stand together. 1968 Olympics, as I come to a close. Marathon was over. People are leaving the auditorium. And then there's a bit of a fracas. There's some lights going on and sirens and ambulances. And people begin to come back into the bleachers because something's going on. A lone runner is making his way into the stadium. This is strange. The gold winner had crossed hours earlier. A lone runner is limping into the stadium. Thomas Akwari of Tanzania had taken a bad fall early on in the race. He damaged his leg and his shoulder, and now he is limping into the arena. The crowds come back into their seats, and when he finally crosses the line, and it was painful to watch him, he gets a standing ovation greater than even the one that won gold. They rush him off to hospital. And the next day, a journalist gets the chance to ask him the question that's on everybody's lips. Why did you do it? You fell so early in the race. Why did you bother doing it? And his reply is etched into history. My country did not send me 5,000 miles to start a race. They sent me 5,000 miles to finish a race. And guys, finishing the race is hard. I read you from the book of Hebrews. Therefore, let us run with perseverance. Perseverance is not a 100-yard dash. It's a marathon. The race that is set before us. Your race is not my race. I can't run your race. You can't run my race. Let us finish the race, but it's hard to finish the race. It's hard because all that stuff is coming through those doors at us. But I want to finish with something very quickly that is coming through the doors that I think is greater than all the others in terms of stopping us finish the race. And it's discouragement. Guys, it's so easy to become discouraged. You know, why is this happening to me? Why is my child going through this? Why is my marriage going through this? Why is my ministry going through this? Why? It's easy to get discouraged. Some of you are discouraged in your hearts. You've served God for 40, 50 years, perhaps 20, 30, but in your hearts you're just discouraged. The youth group's gone badly. Your ministry's gone badly. This is not working. Life's tougher. It's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to lose heart. easy to lose heart. You know, our church the other day had a men's keep fit on a Thursday night, and they said I should go along. So I do go along, and they got this little box, and they take my pulse, and then they ask me to jump up and down on this box for 3 minutes, and at the end they take my pulse again. So it's a Thursday night, and I'm jumping up and down on this box, and they take my pulse to see how fit I am. Apparently, if you're reasonably fit, your pulse rate's meant to come back within 5 or 6 minutes. Mine began to come back on the following Saturday afternoon. Honestly, guys, I get off that box, I literally lost heart. And some of you feel like that. You just lost heart. Perhaps even the Christian community, somewhere in your life, has hurt you a bit. We can be hard sometimes to each other. Some of you have lost heart. And the Bible says don't lose heart. Sometimes we lose heart for many reasons. Sometimes we just feel rubbish Christians. I wake far too early about once a month. It's about 5 o'clock in the morning. And a voice says in this here, Rob, if people really knew you, they wouldn't come and hear you speak. They wouldn't buy your books. To be honest, Rob, you're a bit of a hypocrite. You don't pray very much. You don't read the Bible enough. You don't share your faith enough. If people really knew you, they wouldn't come and listen to you speak. I get that once a month. But if I'm fortunate, I get a voice in the other ear that says, I know you. I know you better than you know yourself. I'm not as impressed with the books and events as you appear to be, but I still love you. Rob, nothing you do can make me love you more. Nothing you do can make me love you less. Don't take yourself too seriously. If the talk in Aberdeen seemed great, it probably wasn't as great as you thought it was. And if it seemed a disaster, it probably wasn't as bad as you thought it was. I'm for you anyway. Serve me day by day. I am your Father. And when that happens, hope rises in my heart. I was speaking at Spring Harvest a couple of years ago. 4,000 people in the big top. I finished speaking. I spoke for 40 minutes. And when I finished, a man stood up and he told a story. It took him 2 minutes. And I knew the second he finished telling it, if only he told it at the beginning, I'd never have spoken. That's pretty sobering for a speaker. This is the story he told that night. He said, I had a great relationship with my mum and my dad, but in his 80s, Dad had a stroke. Left him unable to speak. He said, that was so hard. Dad loved to talk to me. And he said, one day I rang my mum and said, Mum, I'm doing some business at your home the next tomorrow. Can I come and stay the night? Of course you can, son. And he said, it's about 10 o'clock at night and we're drinking Coke and Mum and I are chatting, but my dad can't say anything. He just smiles at me across the room. And then I go up to bed and they've given me the old bedroom I had when I was a boy. And I'm lying there and I'm imagining the Spitfire poster on the left-hand wall, a cricket bat on the right-hand wall and some rugby boots in the corner. I begin to fall off to sleep. But then there's a knock at the door. A bit surprised by that, but I shout, come in, and it's my dad. And Dad can't say anything, but he comes, he looks down at me, and he sees there's a hair in my eye, and he licks his finger, and he pushes the hair back across my forehead, and then he tucks the bedclothes in around me and straightens the top sheet, as he used to when I was a little boy. He kissed me, smiled, and left. He said, I am lying there and I'm 45 years of age. And I got people who work for me and I got kids of my own and I have just been tucked into bed by my own father. And boy, didn't it feel good. And Jeff looked at 4,000 people and said, God wants to do that for some of you. And guys, sometimes it's hard to actually believe that God loves you. But I want you to know He loves you. You are loved. There is nothing to prove. He is your Father. And guys, at the end of my life, when I get there, I'll tell you, I will not be crossing that line if I make it with my head held high. I will be holding on to Him, a bit bruised, a bit broken, a bit of a limp. But I am happy to get there that way, leaning on the Father. Now we're done, Gerrit and I, except for this. I'm going to show you a DVD that you've seen many times before. But I never watch it without a tear in my eye. It's the Barcelona Olympics, 1992. Derek Redmond and his father have trained for many, many years. He got a good chance for a medal, but as he's coming down the straight, his hamstring goes. And then millions of us who watched all around the world saw something happen up in the stand. A man came down. It's his father. He comes down. He throws off security guards who tried to stop him, and he makes his way to his boy. Now, I can tell you something that you won't see on the film. Father says to his son, whispers to him, "We began this together. We'll finish it together." If you are able, would you stand? Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. And guys, therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. And our momentary trouble is achieving for us a weight of glory that far outweighs them all. So, we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen will last forever. God bless you. Thanks for coming today.